Welcome to the Language and Landscape of Food Safety. I'm Dr. Michelle Fadenstiel, and this short intro video, which is going to be broken up into a couple parts, is going to talk about and teach you all about how is food regulated here in America. We're delighted to be bringing this to you. I'm Dr. Michelle Fadenstiel, and I run Dirigo Food Safety, and we're going to talk about me in just a little minute. But for everybody watching out there, I would love to hear more about who you are and what you do. So if you want to pop me an email, you can send it to michelle@dirigofoodsafety.com and tell me who you are and what you're doing. And as we go through these series of videos, what would you like to get out of the class? This series of videos is to help teach folks who are interested in either being in food manufacturing or helping food manufacturers, both at the local level and kind of the bigger regional level in what we call the specialty foods industry, understand what food manufacturers, growers, producers, and processors have to do in order to comply with the vast number of food safety regulations that are out there. I'm delighted you've come on this journey with us, and I look forward to all of your questions. So a little bit about me. That's my speaker bio. I speak on a whole lot of topics, and I'd love to come to your group and talk. I like to think I'm a pretty dynamic teacher. I would say most people think that I am. And we talk about all different sorts of things around here at Dirigo Food Safety to help our clients get more clients themselves and make more money. All this amazing food that everybody in the local food movement and our regional food companies are making is amazing and needs to get out there into the world. So I live in Maine. I come from the perspective of how we do food and food systems here in Maine, so you'll hear me refer to that a lot. I do work both nationally and internationally, so if you have questions about what's going on in your locality, I'm happy to talk to you about those. Again, you can just drop me a email at michelle@dirigofoodsafety.com. That's Michelle with one L. Okay, so let's just jump right on into it. So the first question that we really talk about is how is food inspected or regulated, okay? Because those aren't necessarily the same thing. You might be surprised to know that there isn't daily inspection of anything in America except meat and poultry. But what does that actually mean? Well, so when we start thinking about this, I like to start people down at the local level because that's where people interact with their food. So when you go out to a restaurant or you go to a butcher shop or you go to the supermarket, those places are regulated locally by your local Department of Health, and they're regulated under something called the food code, okay? Every state has a food code. Some larger localities have a food code. New York has its own, like New York City has its own food code. Chicago has its own food code. But the state of Connecticut has one food code for the entire state, okay? So it's locally regulated and can be regulated very, very differently, okay? The Department of Health, by and large, is only in charge of the food code. There's some, some ways they can be deputized, and more of that will be changing, all right? So that's one way of local food regulation. The other way is in a few more than 24 states in the union. They have local meat and poultry inspection at the state level. So your state Department of Agriculture, if you're in one of these states, has meat and poultry inspectors, okay? And those meat and poultry inspectors go in and, inspect people making poultry for meat and poultry for sale in their state. State inspected meat and poultry can't cross state lines, I believe with the exception of Wisconsin, but they're an outlier, and you can ask me about them. Feel free to pop an email and ask about something called cooperative interstate shipments. But meat inspected at a state level can't be sold across state lines. So then how is meat and poultry sold across state lines? Well, it's sold if you're under USDA inspection, under the National Meat and Poultry Products Inspection Acts. But what about everything else? Well, almost everything else is regulated by the FDA under a couple of different rules. The biggest one, the most sweeping change that we've seen, that may be what brought you guys here today to be listening to this video or sitting in class, is FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. You're going to hear me refer to that a lot over the coming couple of lectures. So the FDA regulates everything that's not meat and poultry, and they regulate it under FSMA, they regulate it under fisheries, HACCP, they regulate it under juice HACCP and the low acid canned food regulations. And we'll go much more into that. So those are our local and our national systems. But those are regulations. The USDA will send a meat inspector. The state will send a meat inspector that will be watching what you do on a daily basis, but probably not continuously unless you're slaughtering. And so there's this whole other system that has come into play, all right? And it's the third-party inspection system. And this is by and large promulgated by the Global Food Safety Initiative, which is an international not-for-profit based out of Paris that has taken the ISO standards. ISO stands for International Standards Organization, and it's an outfit that was created through work by the Navy back in the 70s to try and figure out if the Navy was actually getting what it was paying for, okay? And the ISO standards basically lay out in really excruciating detail how to describe your management process and your production processes. The Global Food Safety Initiative helped that become adopted by food manufacturers. Every other thing, every other consumable that you use, the computer you're watching me on, or the cell phone you're watching me on, your headphones that you're using, your car and all its component parts, those are all manufactured or produced to an ISO standard. And now we have that standard in food, okay? And that's important because we're going to talk about like what that means. Why do we care that we have regulations versus inspections? Well, the truth is that it matters because you make money differently based on whether or not you meet simply the FDA standards or the USDA standards versus meeting a third-party inspection standard. Okay, if you meet a third-party inspection standard that somebody has asked you for, your avenues of selling your product are much, much, much higher. Now, it's conversely a lot more work, but if we look at how we're building businesses here in Maine, how we're building local food businesses across the country, we have to begin as we mean to continue. And sometimes that means understanding the market realities of the Global Food Safety Initiative versus your USDA or regular FDA inspection. And we're going to dive into an awful lot of this as we go forward. So stay tuned, and I'm glad you joined us. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.